cold wind whipped through the narrow street as a little girl, no older than 10, clutched a small bottle of milk against her chest. Her hands trembled, not just from the chill but from fear. She hadn't paid for it. She hadn't even wanted to steal. But in her mind, she could still hear her baby brother's weak cries from the night before, his hunger so raw, so desperate, that her young heart couldn't bear it anymore. The store owner's angry voice shattered the fragile hope she held. "Thief," he barked, grabbing her by the arm. "You think you can just walk out without paying?" Before the girl could even explain, her aunt, who had brought her to the shop, stormed over, her face red with embarrassment and fury. Instead of defending the child, she shoved her roughly toward the door. "You shame me," the aunt spat. "Get out before I beat you for disgracing me." The girl stumbled onto the pavement, tears blurring her eyes. She still clutched the bottle of milk, but the shopkeeper yanked it back from her hands before slamming the door shut. Now she was left with nothing but shame, cold air, and the sound of her own sobs. What no one inside noticed was the black car parked a few feet away. Inside sat a man with silver hair and sharp eyes that softened as he watched the scene unfold. He was a millionaire, a businessman whose name commanded respect across the city, but wealth had not hardened his heart, because years ago he too had been that child standing hungry in the street. He stepped out of the car slowly, his polished shoes clicking against the sidewalk. The little girl noticed him, startled, and quickly wiped her face, as though hiding her tears would hide her pain. "Why were you crying, little one?" he asked gently. She shook her head, afraid to admit the truth, but hunger, worry, and exhaustion won over pride. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "My brother's hungry. He's just a baby. Mama's gone. Papa's gone too. My aunt, she doesn't want us. I just wanted him to have some milk." The man felt a lump rise in his throat. He crouched down so his eyes met hers. "And you were willing to take the blame just to feed him?" The girl nodded, her small frame shaking. He didn't hesitate. Without another word, he took her tiny hand and guided her back inside the store. The shopkeeper, upon seeing the man, stiffened. Everyone in town knew who he was. The millionaire's voice was calm but firm. "This child is not a thief. She is desperate, and shame on you for not seeing the difference." He bought not just the milk, but bags of food, bread, fruit, warm soup in containers, and placed them in the girl's arms. Her eyes widened, as though the weight she carried was not heavy but a miracle. But he didn't stop there. He asked where she lived. Hesitant, she led him through winding alleys until they reached a crumbling apartment building. Inside, the sight broke him, peeling paint, broken furniture, and in the corner, a baby boy wrapped in thin blankets, crying weakly. The man's heart clenched. He remembered nights in his own childhood when his mother had cried herself to sleep, unable to feed him. He had sworn, back then, that if he ever made it in life, he would never let another child suffer that way if he could help it. He turned to the girl. "From today, you don't have to worry, I will help you." But it wasn't easy. The girl's aunt protested. "She's not your responsibility, they're not your problem," she shouted, more concerned about appearances than the children's survival. The man stood tall, his voice cutting through her anger. "Maybe not my problem, but they are my chance to do what's right, and I won't turn away." Legal processes, social workers, paperwork, all became hurdles in the days that followed. The millionaire faced criticism too. Some people whispered that he was just doing it for publicity. Others doubted he could care for children who weren't his own. But none of that mattered when he saw the children slowly smile again, their cheeks no longer hollow, their nights no longer filled with hunger. He ensured the baby received proper medical care. He sent the girl to school, buying her new clothes, books, and shoes. At first, she walked with her head down, afraid of being judged. But little by little, with encouragement, she began to raise her chin, to laugh, to dream again. One evening, months later, the girl sat beside the man on the porch of his home. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of gold and pink. She looked at him, eyes shining. "Why did you help me?" she asked softly. He smiled, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Because once, long ago, someone helped me when I was just like you, and I learned that kindness, when passed on, becomes a chain that never breaks." Years later, the little girl would grow into a woman with strength and compassion beyond measure. The baby brother would thrive, never again going to bed hungry. And the millionaire, he had not just given money, he had given hope. He had rewritten a story that could have ended in tragedy.